So first, we're going to be talking about what intent data is and how to map the intent signals to your funnel. Also going to be covering how G2 intent helps your organization hit business targets. And then finally, something very impactful, I think, will be showing how to measure impact and ROI from those intent signals and data. So if you're ready, Michael, you can kick it off.
Okay, let's do it. So as we start talking about intent data, I actually want to start by asking you how familiar you all are with intent data. You might have heard of it. This might be the first time you're hearing of it. Some of you are probably actively using it, but let's throw up a poll real quick and see how familiar each of you are with intent data.
There's the poll.
Thank you. Thank you. Got some good responses coming in. All right, we'll give it another second or two here. There we go. 5 more seconds. If you haven't given us your answer on intent data yet, please do it. Cool. Gonna share the results here. Let's see. So looking at the responses, about 30% of you said that you are very familiar with intent data. 41% of you said you are familiar with intent data. 27% said that you're somewhat familiar, and 3% of you said that you are unfamiliar. And the good news is no matter what your level of familiarity is, you'll learn a couple things in this session today. And like I said, Rachel and I are always available after the fact for questions. So I'm actually going to ask one more follow-up question before we get started. And this is not going to be a poll question, but it's going to be in the chat. How many of you are already using intent data with sales and marketing campaigns? No wrong answers here. Just curious how many of you are already using it. Cool. Maddie is. Who else? TJ, Steven, Tina, awesome. Robin, Lane. Okay, cool. So we've got, seems like most people are, some people aren't. So let's start. Like, what is intent data? Intent data very simply reveals certain online behaviors from your target audience that signals what they're going to do next. We talk about this a lot at G2. You might imagine that as the biggest software marketplace with more than 80 million shoppers a year, that's a lot of opportunity for intent data. So whether somebody is starting their journey or continuing their journey, whether they're at the top of the funnel or at the end of the funnel, comparing the companies that they're interested in, all of those different behaviors create intent data points. So there's something that we talk about a good bit at G2, and it's the concept of implicit intent versus explicit intent. So I assume that most of you are probably using intent solutions like ZoomInfo or Bombora. You might be using an account-based platform like a 6sense or a Rollworks or a Demandbase. So generally, like, there are a lot of different sources of intent that any of those providers can pull in. But generally, what's happening is as people are searching the web or reading articles or interacting with content that has keywords that you've said you want intent data for, that's what's happening. And so very often as people are doing things like reading articles or looking at a website or something like that, they may come across like a product term that relates to what your company does, or it may be something about your category. A lot of those providers scrape the internet for that data and can give you that to use in campaigns. So that's the way that we usually think about implicit data. There are people who are out there researching, comparing, and somehow like these providers are kind of scraping the internet for that data and making it actionable for you. Explicit intent data is, you don't really have to make the inferences about what they're doing next. They are very obviously taking a specific activity. So if you think about G2 as a marketplace, people don't come to G2 and read reviews on Sunday morning for fun. People use G2 when they're really ready to compare and buy software services. So you think about the nature of a marketplace. Marketplaces come into the funnel kind of, I would say, usually like the middle to lower part where someone's actively shopping. If you are on a marketplace shopping, you are explicitly sharing that your intent is to purchase, to research, to know more. So what we'll talk about a little bit in this session is where you use implicit intent data, where you use explicit intent data, and how you put the pieces and the signals together to build a buyer's journey that complements your marketing funnel. So I'm going to start with an example that I use that illustrates this. And this will also be a chat opportunity. I'd really like your feedback. So let's start with this. Imagine that you are a Honda dealer in Denver, Colorado, and someone Googles Honda Accord. How bad would you want their information? You can pop it in the chat. Bad, very bad, maybe not so bad. Someone somewhere Googles Honda Accord. All right, we've got TJ. Caitlin, I like your answer. Kyle, same. Eric, I agree with you. Okay. So let's say then that someone else Googles Honda Accord versus Toyota Camry. How bad do you want their contact information? How bad would you want to know who they are? Medium. I'm with you, Caitlin. A little more than medium. Okay, that's a good one, Kyle. Who else? Come on, you're a Honda dealer, you want to sell some cars, and this person has searched Honda Accord versus Toyota Camry. How bad do you want it? Okay, Kyle, medium. Yes, Eric, I agree with you. They're showing that they're in market, maybe, so that's good. They're comparing. All right. So then the third option I'm going to give you is someone has gone onto Auto Trader and they're searching for Honda Accords for sale in Denver, Colorado. How bad do you want their contact information? Yes, exactly. Okay. So this is the way that we think about intent data. Like similar to the Auto Trader reference, G2 is a marketplace just like Auto Trader. So you know that when people are on G2, they're actively shopping. Like this is how you think about intent data. Someone searching for Honda Accord could be anywhere, anyone. It could be somebody who saw that their neighbor just got a Honda Accord. Like they want to know more about it. They may not be in market at all, but somebody who's shopping on a marketplace is clearly showing intent. And when you think about that implicit versus explicit intent data, thinking about scraping the internet for someone reading articles or someone who is really actively shopping in a marketplace, the latter is the G2 buyer intent. So I feel like this analogy worked really well. You guys got it. So I appreciate your participation. So this is kind of mapping out what we just talked about. So this is your average marketing funnel. You've got unaware, awareness, consideration, decision, and purchase at the bottom. So this is how intent signals usually map out to your marketing funnel. And I feel like this is probably the part where people start saying, do we get copies of the slides? The recording will be available to you. And if you want a copy of the slide deck, let Rachel or Aaron and I know. We're happy to give you one. So, at the very top, intent signals, somebody who's unaware, they might be just searching for something that is related to what you do. If you sell sales software and somebody searches for cold call tips, like they may not have any idea who your company is. They're just starting down the buyer's journey. They're at the very top. Similarly, a little bit higher intent than that, but somebody who is searching a G2 category, maybe they've done a little bit of research and now they're on G2 looking at conversational intelligence or sales engagement software, but they only know about the category and that it exists. They're not aware of who your company is yet. The level below that is awareness. They now are aware of your company. So they might be doing things like visiting your website. Since your G2 profile is generally kind of an extension of your website in terms of lead gen and content, they're probably visiting your G2 profile. If they made it to your category and you are getting reviews and showing up positively in your G2 category, then you're going to show up and they're probably making their way there too. This is also where brand searches come in. So folks who are maybe Googling your company name, they've heard of you, they've heard of your category, so now they're Googling your company. So the next level after that is consideration. This person is aware of your category, they're aware of your company, and at this point, they might actually be looking at your competitors. G2 can tell you that information. So they're aware of the category, they're aware of who you are. They're probably going to do a little bit of research and figure out what people say about you and what people say about your competitors. They might also, at this point, be going to high value pages on your website, like your pricing pages or your packaging pages. If you put pixels on those pages, depending on the account-based platforms that you're using, you can retarget them and get in front of those people. And you know that now they're really considering your company. I would say similarly, your G2 profile views are important here because at the beginning, they may have just taken a look at your profile. They might have looked at where you stand in your category in the G2 quarterly reports, but at this point, they might be diving more into what your customers say and what your ratings look like, things like that. And then the last stage here that we really think about is decision. So this is a person who is not just doing research, they're doing head-to-head comparisons on G2. They're literally looking up you versus your competitors. So when we look at how these funnel stages map to intent signals and what you're trying to do, at the awareness level, you are increasing visibility and share of voice. You want to make these people aware, quite frankly. You're looking at things like traffic, impressions, click-through rate. For consideration, now you know that this person's a little bit more serious in their search. So you want to build deeper engagement with them. You want to make sure your brand shows up positively. This is where they're going to be going to your website. They might be doing some research on awards, which again, like those quarterly G2 reports is a great place to make sure that you show up when people enter the consideration phase. And then decision, this is where somebody might really be down to the end. They're comparing you to a competitor or two competitors. And this is where you want to have differentiation. This is where you want to make sure that you're using customer stories and testimonials or success stories or awards that you've won to really sway people who are at this stage of the funnel. So this is actually one of my favorite parts of G2 buyer intent data. And I'm sorry to hit you with another open question, but how many of you are currently running a competitive strategy or competitive campaigns? You can drop it in the chat. Caitlin, got you. Maddie, TJ. Okay, Erica. So if you want to drop it into the chat, I would love to know what data you're using to run competitive campaigns with. And before I came to G2, I was actually a previous user. And so as working in demand gen, you might imagine that making sure that my company shows up when people are searching for our competitors is pretty important to me. I talk to our sales team about this a lot. And I have to remind them sometimes that marketers are competitive too. Like, we like to win. We love a rip and replace. So the way that you, I think I remember what I was struggling with is getting really clear intent data that was helping to show results for competitive intent. So you can't place a retargeting pixel on your competitors' websites. Depending on the industry that you're in, you might have somebody who's searching for a product term, or you might have a competitor that has a generic term. And when you try to pull intent data for competitive campaigns, it might be pulling people who are at a different stage of the funnel or people who aren't quite sure. But the one source that you can absolutely use for competitive intent is G2. Again, G2 is a marketplace. So when people are comparing you to competitors head to head, or they are researching alternatives to your company, this is the most explicit level of competitive intent data that you can find. And I say that again as a previous user of G2 before I was here. When we started using G2 competitive intent and pulling audiences into 6 Sense and LinkedIn for folks that we knew were actively comparing us against our competitors, is when we started seeing conversions. Previously, when we were I feel like it's a little squishy, but we were at the point of we had some competitive keyword sets and account-based platforms, but we weren't really seeing a lot of conversions. And I think when we looked at some of those companies and accounts and compared them to what we saw closing, I think we didn't really see the needle move until we started using the G2 head-to-head comparisons and alternative research. So this is an important piece, because when I talk to marketers, I think everybody wants to have a competitive strategy. Everybody wants to win. Like I said, marketers are competitive. But the data that you're using to power your competitive intent strategy sometimes is a little cloudy. So for me, and in our campaigns as well, G2 competitive intent has really been the clearest source of people who are looking at your competitors. So there are a couple ways you can use that. You can certainly use it in campaigns. It's a good time to make sure, like we were chatting about before, if somebody's in the consideration or decision phase, you want to make sure that your awards are showing up in front of them, that customer stories and testimonials are showing up in front of them. But did you know that your sales team can also be using the same intent that you are getting? So when you marry marketing and sales together and you put that intent data together, so now you're getting campaigns in front of people who are showing competitive intent, but your sellers can also know what action these folks are taking before they come inbound, or if they're in an active deal cycle. So imagine being able to have that. You're an AE, you have an open deal right now, you've been trying to close it, and you start to get a notification that this account is actually looking at your competitor. Imagine having the timely, accurate, explicit intent data to send them a message and say, hey, I actually just saw that you guys were researching, this company. I want to chat with you about it. We've got a lot of folks who actually churn and come here, and this is why. Like, take a look at this G2 head-to-head report. Where I came from before, when we would use this, we pulled some of the things like speed to lead, like how quickly could we get running, how quickly could we start seeing results, how quickly were we seeing ROI, what was the value, how easy was it to use. So this is where you can use competitive intent to run marketing campaigns for sure, and make sure that you're getting in front of the right people. And your sellers can use competitive intent to personalize and contextualize messaging and help accelerate deals. Sometimes when we talk about this with customers and prospects, like usually the marketers are like, this is the competitive data I've been waiting for. This is what my strategy needs. And I will say, having used it this way before, I certainly agree. So with that in mind, I'm actually going to turn it over to Rachel, and she's going to tell us a little bit about how and where you can use all of that data.
Yes, thank you, Michael. And for those of you who were not present when we kicked off the session today, I'm a senior CSM at G2. So excited to inform you about our integrations. You might be thinking, oh my goodness, I like the idea of using G2 intent, but I already have a dozen other tools. I have some other intent sources, and I feel overwhelmed thinking about how I can get them to all work together. So the good news is we have an extensive list of integrations, as you can see on the list here, continually evolving these over the next year, especially. We've really leaned into our partnerships recently. And this is to support you in operationalizing the data in the various channels throughout the buyer's journey. So this way, we can easily plug that G2 data into these systems that you're already using for selling, marketing, retention, data. All of these are offered free and out of the box, with the exception of the Salesforce Connector app. So you can work closely with your CSM to get these rocking and rolling all throughout the funnel. So I took a peek at the audience today, and I know we have folks from both sales and marketing. So next, let's dive into how marketing and sales can collaborate in leveraging G2 intent. Looks like a storm is rolling through Nashville. I'm not sitting in the dark, I promise. It just kind of looks a little bit cave-like suddenly. All right. So Michael shared a lot about the different types of G2 intent signals, as well as a bit on G2 content. lined up with various phases within the marketing funnel, and also how to set up KPIs for the different phases. But I understand that you might be scratching your head when it comes to the actual execution of these campaigns. So here on the screen, I've outlined just some high-level examples of what it could look like in practice. I won't dive into all of these playbooks, but rest assured that you will receive the Zoom recording in a bit after today's session. So let's cover one example live. So hypothetically, I'm a G2 customer who's also a marketer, much like many of you. And a buyer who's in my ICP takes a look at my G2 profile. Now, I want to say that some of these buyers looking at your profile will proceed to visit your website, where you have an opportunity to then convert them into a lead. We estimate that's about 12 to 38% of the time, but the vast majority of these buyers will not opt in to be a lead upon visiting or won't visit your website at all. So what I'm going to do as a marketer is trigger a campaign sharing my G2 reviews, my reference pages, or maybe my licensed G2 grid report that showcases where my company really shines. And then I'm going to use my product focused content containing G2 reviews and report data points in my ads and retargeting efforts. So pairing that G2 content with the G2 intent really creates that 1-2 punch, because these buyers are already pursuing G2 perusing G2 to do their research. We know they trust G2, so it makes sense to target them with that G2 content. Next, we'll move on to sales strategy. Here's an example of how things could look on the sales side of the house. So we understand at G2 that sales continues to get harder, especially as buyers have more information than ever at their disposal. 90% of buyers will only reach out to you when they're willing to have a conversation. So G2's buyer intent helps you to understand and identify these buyers proactively for outbound efforts. For some vendors, this data will help inform you and reinforce conversations that you're already having with these companies. But other buyers will be net new organizations, either researching you or your competitors. So hypothetically, a new lead comes in maybe through Salesforce or a G2 email notification. And depending on if this is an existing lead or not, you'll follow one of a few paths. If this is an existing opportunity, the lead can then be passed off to the AE for personalization and prospecting. If they were looking at competitors, which ones? So you can consider including a G2 comparison report in the outreach to show where your company shines in those head-to-head comparisons taking place on G2. If this is not an existing lead, the SDR can leverage LinkedIn or maybe Zoom info, depending on what's in your tech stack, to identify a point of contact in your ICP, and then do informed outreach from there based on the insight given within the G2 intent signals. I want to mention as a CSM that your G2 CSMs have all kinds of outreach templates and inspiration for your sales folks to use for the outreach based on the different signals that they're seeing coming through G2. There's different levels of packages, of course, but each level of intent could absolutely be a great opportunity for sales. Looks like Michael just put something in the chat. He says,
this is a fun stat.
Go ahead.
When you hear this as a marketer, I think my mind initially goes to wasted spend. And the stat is only 5% of your target audience is actually in market at any given time. And again, for me as a demand gen person, the first thing I go to is how much money am I wasting on people who aren't actually in market? And of course, I think you can make the case that you should be spending money on awareness advertising so that when they're ready and they are in market, they think of you first. I totally agree with that. But again, I think about where G2 buyer intent falls in the funnel. And if you are really wanting to make sure that you're capturing the 5% of people who are actually in market and cleaning up the spend for the lower part of your funnel, how do you find them? Those are the people who are in shopping marketplaces showing explicit intent. Those are people who are at the bottom of the funnel. They're looking, they're comparing, they're shopping. I think all of us spend a lot of money to get in front of people who probably aren't actually ready to buy. And like I said, sometimes that's good. But depending on how you're running your campaigns and what your budgets look like, if you have less budget to spend, make sure you're spending them on the people that you know are in market.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah.
All right. And since we're focusing on full funnel, I want to ensure that we touch on leveraging intent data for your retention efforts. We know this is super important right now, and G2 buyer intent data does let you see what customers are researching, so you can work to attain accounts and reduce churn. So leveraging G2 intent gives you the opportunity to gain insight into a client's intention to renew before your customer success managers even begin discussions. Therefore, you can course correct early, give your customer success team plenty of time to pinpoint challenges, prepare for objections, and stay one step ahead of your competitors, so they don't jump in there and steal your customers. So what that looks like is supporting your customer success team. So set up churn alerts, leveraging your G2 intent, setting up notifications for each CSM for their existing book of business. You can do this via any of the G2 integrations, such as Salesforce, maybe Gainsight, and also prepare them with messaging should they see signals. Folks looking at alternatives to your product, or maybe doing head-to-head comparisons when heading into renewal conversations. These can all be indicators of potential churn. So we want to ensure that your CSMs are prepared and supported, so we're able to get ahead of that. Additionally, you could run campaigns, maybe on LinkedIn or 6sense, creating an audience of customers who have been looking at alternatives to your product, or preparing competitors, just to kind of give that air cover. You can target these customers with confidence boosting messages, or perhaps G2 content to show that they should stay with your product and not consider the alternatives. Next up, I want to share with you a customer success story from Good United, a customer that just came on in April. And they're already seeing ROI after 3 months. So in early April, we met with them. We learned what they cared about, how they want to see success, the KPIs and conversion metrics that are important to them. They actually leveraged our Rollworks ABM integration and set up KPIs focusing on unaware, aware, and engaged customers, hoping to bring some of those unaware customers into the aware and engaged bucket. And with 3 months' time, they saw an improvement in their sales velocity. As you can see on the screen, 22% faster time to close compared to their average deals prior to using G2 intent. They're also seeing an increase in deal size by 13% compared to average deal. And then, as I mentioned, 3 months in, they were able to see complete ROI. So wanted to leave that simple success story for you today. We have plenty more on the G2 sales pages that are mentioned earlier in the chat. And if you would believe it, we have one more question for you in the chat. And that is, how are you measuring success with your G2 intent data? How are you measuring ROI and impact? I'll give you a moment to put that into the chat, and then we can dive into some best practices for doing so.
I always love this question because often when I talk with other marketers, everybody's excited to use intent data, and we're like, yeah, I'm using it. Yeah, me too. Okay, cool. But then sometimes I think, when your CMO or your boss or somebody says, well, what's the ROI? What are we getting for it? I think sometimes the answer is like, I think it's good. It feels good. Like, yeah, I think it's working. So at G2, we've got some methods and things that we recommend for how you measure the ROI of intent data. It makes those conversations a lot easier. So Steven, Ops Created, yep, Kyle poorly. Love the honesty. I've definitely been there. Chris, same thing. So let's jump into what we recommend. And when we were going through this, we landed on kind of the 3 C's. And so the things that you measure to understand and illustrate the ROI of intent data are conversions, costs, and click-through rate. So we'll run through this really quickly. What we generally recommend is making sure that if you really want to test intent data, you've got to have some audiences for campaigns that are pretty apples to apples. You need to have similar creative, and you need to have similar filters otherwise. But if you pull in your intent audience versus a broad audience or even a filtered audience, for example, on LinkedIn, when you start tracking your conversions, you'll probably see a couple things. Don't be surprised if your conversions for your intent audience are actually a little bit more expensive. Look, traditionally, you're narrowing down your audience. That's going to be a little more expensive. But where you really need to watch what happens is down funnel. How are these people converting? Are your conversion rates from MQL to SQL accepted higher? Are their deals moving faster? And then for things like click-through rate, are they responding better to your content than the audience without intent data? So another important point is making sure that you have your UTM and tracking structures set up correctly. When I was a previous G2 customer, I will honestly admit that there was a point where our CSM, who I know is on this call, hey Lauren, she said, "How are you guys judging the ROI of G2 buyer intent?" And we were on the call, and I was like, we just know it works. And she was like, "No, but what are you doing? Like, how are you doing it?" And what Lauren was so graciously getting at was, at that time, our campaign structure was set up such that our UTMs were for source, medium, and campaign. And we weren't setting UTMs specifically for the audiences that we were using intent data. So we were really losing the ability to see the intent data specific results. And when Lauren mentioned that, I think it was really a game-changing moment, because we were on the call, and at that time, even our marketing ops people were like, "Oh, yeah." So, depending on the platform and the integrations that you're using, certainly, like I said, you can look in platform and you can see click-through rate and you can see cost per acquisition and things like that. You're going to probably have to dive into Salesforce to take a look at your down funnel conversion. Like I said, from MQL to SQL to an op created to closed won, those things should all be higher and faster with intent data. And then, like I said, the UTMs help pay off the other parts of the experience. In the past, when you have good UTM data, the things we were looking at were like, how much time do people spend on the page? That's a really important metric to let you know whether or not your content is resonating with people. Like, are they bouncing or are they spending time and scrolling? Those are important things too. So anyway, those are from the marketing side. That's how we judge ROI. And it's worked when you pull the numbers. And like I said, don't be surprised if your conversion costs are a little more expensive on the front end, but take a look at the down funnel metrics. And what we actually see is that generally your cost of acquisition overall is lower with buyer intent data, because you have less wasted spend, even if the conversions are each slightly more expensive. Rachel, any thoughts?
Nope, that's exactly what I was going to mention as well. Ensuring that you're doing that A/B testing and leveraging those UTMs. I think ensuring attribution is clear on those UTMs from both the channel and the campaign standpoint. So for example, you're running a campaign on LinkedIn, ensuring that you have both the channel as well as the campaign outline. So maybe the campaign would be brand awareness, for instance. And I really like how Michael mentioned that it's important to measure behavior in addition to the cost as well. So how much time is being spent on the website? What is the bounce rate? And some of those other key components just outside of the cost.
So with that, we want to turn it over to you, actually. If you want to raise your hand, if you've got questions, or if you'd like to come off mute or pop it in the chat. I see, Erica, we've got a question. Do you see most of your clients measuring ROI with source pipe or influence pipe, whether that's right or wrong? That is such a good question, and it is actually something that we chat about a lot at G2. I think I think the best way to do it is actually both. It depends on your attribution model. I think it depends on how you are thinking about net new revenue versus how you're thinking about expanding and renewing customer revenue. So, for example, like if somebody's already a customer, they're probably not going to go fill out a form, right? Like they're already familiar with you. So it's going to be hard to get that engagement point, but yet you know the things that you're doing are working. So that's where I think for customer and expansion and upsell, we rely pretty heavily on influence. We use Visible for that. And then for net new, we use sourced like pipe and ops created and things like that. Does that help? Okay.
Yes.
Got
Cool.
a head nod. Thanks, Erica. And I see Caitlin also mentioned that she would love to get more plays in using the G2 Sixth Sense integration. Caitlin, I would love to connect with your customer success manager and inform them that you might be looking for something a little bit more robust than what's been discussed thus far. So I will ensure that we get back to you via email or hop on a Zoom to discuss further support and enablement from the Sixth Sense perspective.
Cool. Who else? Questions, thoughts, comments?
Feel free to come off mute. We want to ensure that this is kind of an open dialogue, a chance for you to connect with your peers as well. Or maybe there's some additional G2 folks that want to hop off mute and add some additional color.
Yeah.
Hey guys, this is Steve Spiegel. Where do you guys get the templates for the BDRs so they could set up a campaign for the intent customers?
So where do we get them, or how can you get them?
You guys mentioned you had templates.
Yeah. Yep. So we've
where do
crafted messaging based on the different signals. We've tested that year over year. So we have some really great messaging that you can use. You can just ask your CSM for some inspiration, and they'll send that over to you and customize it to your organization as well.
So it's not on the platform. There's not a place where you have it.
No,
Right.
we don't have that outlined on the platform. There are some templates on our Learn Hub that you can pull from there as well.
Okay, and okay, I'll go there. I have a Learn Hub.
That's
Yeah.
a good call out, Steve, because the rollout of G2 for sales is something we're working on this quarter. And I think we always want to make sure that people have templates and the things they need to feel successful. So if we have some ideas for high performing outreach examples, like that's probably like, I'll take that as a takeaway for something we can create. And oh, see, there we go. Caitlin's already got it. Caitlin's our director of customer marketing. So looks like something like that should be coming soon.
Oh, very cool. And
Yeah.
for our business, we're a B2B SaaS company. We have a ideal customer. It's a niche customer. So a lot of the intent data right now is they're not in market. They're not in our market. I don't mean they're ready. I don't mean the market ready to buy. They're just not our customer that we're trying to hit. Is there a way to filter it down more to get that vertical?
So you're trying to make sure, like you're trying to get in front of somebody who you feel like is maybe unaware. Is that right?
I'm trying to get in front of our guys in front of the right customers. I'm trying to have marketing send campaigns to the right customers and not just spray it out to a lot of people that aren't our ideal customer. And right now, the signals, they're bringing back a lot of, I call it noise, because it's not going to be a customer we're going to close.
Mm-hmm. Are you leveraging any integrations today and then filtering by your ICP, or?
Like what? Like Zoom info or something like that?
Yeah. How are you leveraging the intent today? Are you leveraging it just out of my G2, or do you have integrations in place like Salesforce or?
Got it. Well, we had we had it integrated into our HubSpot, but then we started to get a lot of new companies into it, and it was causing a mess. Right now, we have a Slack channel where
Okay.
we see all of that intent data coming in,
Mhm.
and I'm not in marketing. I work with them,
Sure.
but uh, so I work with marketing, and we talk about, are these signals good, or are we not getting the right customer? Because we don't want to spend money on the wrong people. And when you're going after a niche, I always find it challenging, and I was hoping you guys could help in some way to help throttle that down.
I
Yeah,
think
there are definitely. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
you can go ahead.
Feel free to answer from a marketing perspective.
Yeah, so I would say, Steve, if you want, I'd love to connect with you offline about it. I've got some ideas. I think, you can look at the accounts that are looking at your G2 profile, or looking at your category, or looking at your competitors. You can take those accounts and use something like a contact enrichment software like a Zoom Info. You could filter and get, like, I'm not exactly sure what your ICP is, but if you have the most success selling to marketers, or selling to salespeople, or selling to developers, like, you can pull some of those titles and then probably run like a pretty tight ABM play. I think your marketing team should be able to do something like that. Make sure you've got the account that you're looking for, try to get some of the right people, and then start hitting them with really targeted messaging. Are you in sales?
No, I'm the CEO.
Okay.
So marketing. I work closely with marketing and sales.
Okay. So
And so I was really interested in learning more about how we can make the intent data work better.
mhm.
And I'd love to get with you offline. I don't want to
Yeah.
take up
Sure.
more of the time here.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
I would love that. And I think if you can pull accounts, like the accounts who are showing intent, get contacts and find some of those folks, and then run some marketing plays, and as well as have your sales team work on some of that really customized outreach, I think, which is probably why you were asking. That's where I've seen like the secret sauce kind of unlock. So yeah, I'll make sure we connect on LinkedIn, and love to chat with you more about it.
Yeah, yeah. And thanks. What I learned here was that, and I don't know if we're doing it or not, but from the intent data, we could actually be running campaigns. Marketing could be running campaigns
Mhm.
out of HubSpot. Our sales team working with you guys could get templates and to use that to run successful outreach campaigns. And well, this is why I'm here. I'm here to
Yeah.
see how we can
Sure.
get more opportunities in the funnel from the G2 source.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So marketing could say, hey, look, this is good ROI. We need to keep this going.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, we're
Sure.
we're happy to have you. And just like some low-hanging fruit, you are able to filter the signals that are flowing into your Slack instance as well. So that might be something you can do in the immediate, and then schedule some time with Michael or myself to kind of dig in a little bit deeper, as well as your customer success manager. We'll look forward to it.
Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, Steve. Anyone else? Good to go. Okay.
All right. I think we are.
Erica, speaking of marketing and sales alignment, do you find sales adoption has been a challenge with your clients? I think we had a miss here, no customized outreach sequences. It's a good question. Rachel, you want to take the first shot at that one?
I guess it can
Yeah.
be a challenge. It kind of depends what systems you're using for your outreach. I would definitely recommend leveraging some of our integrations if you have the existing tech stack, such as Salesforce, Zoom Info. We have a brand new SalesLoft integration. Even if you don't have a robust tech stack, there are easy ways to conduct your outreach based on the intent signals with those templates that I was mentioning earlier on the session. You can absolutely get those for your BDRs, SDRs, and your customer success manager is also able to train up those those reps. We have materials from an enablement perspective. We can train them on exactly how to leverage the intent data, and then give them exactly the plug and play templates that they can use in their outreach in a way that aligns with your company values and communication preferences. So that's all something your customer success manager can help you with, Erica.
Thank you.
Erica, I got a follow-up thought for you too. So my team meets pretty regularly with the folks who run our inbound and outbound teams. So we talk a lot about what's working from a marketing perspective. For our sales teams, just like you mentioned, what sequences are working for you, what type of messaging is moving the needle. In my experience, I think if you're able to approach, are you a marketer? Okay. So I think the way I've done this in the past, if you're able, let's say maybe there's a couple of SDRs on your inbound team, or maybe you've got some folks on your outbound team. I think if you open up this conversation with them and share that, hey, I can run air cover on these campaigns, and I can also tell you when they're looking at our category. So maybe they need education, or they're looking at our competitors. So maybe they need third-party validation. Do you want to give this a shot and see how it goes with your messaging? 10 times out of 10, I've heard yes. So that's how I would say, I think we have a good working relationship with sales, and that's how I've used it before, and it's also worked well. So I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. All right, let's see. Anyone else? As we're coming up towards the end of the hour, but any other questions? No? Cool. Okay. Well, I will just mention thanks so much to everyone for joining this. Talking about intent data and how to use it through your funnel and maximize the value is one of the things I love the most. It's part of the reason I work at G2, because I believe in our intent data. So if you want to find me on LinkedIn or email, I would love to chat with you more about it anytime.
Yep. And same goes for me. Would love to get connected on LinkedIn. If you need support and maybe a reminder of who your customer success manager is, I'd be happy to make that connection as well. Or if there are any materials needed as a follow-up to today's session, I'm happy to help there as well. As Caitlin plugged at the beginning of the session, if you want to scroll up in the chat, there's a link to our Learn Hub where you can find a ton of information around the topics we discussed today as well. And then we hope to see you at future office hours as well.
Yep. Cool. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.